So this got heated, recently and quickly. Bellular, Rich Campbell, Asmongold, and more all taking turns tackling the brewing war of the MMOs. Passions and tempers flaring.
I'm gonna cut my fucking hair right now. It's getting in my goddamn fucking eye. Where are the scissors? Where the fuck are the scissors? Shit!
People on both sides playing tug of war with their favorite content creators, trying to force them to declare a team. And as we all know, in the world of video games, there can only be one good game per genre. So who will take the title in this battle for the hearts of the gamers? The long-standing, out-of-touch old king who believes he knows what's best for his players, despite their over a decade-long outcry against almost every decision he's made. Or the young challenger, a beautiful but undeniably strange and sometimes just plain weird man of the people, whose recent rise in popularity due to his focus on making an experience that is fun before anything else has developed a sycophantic following of evangelists preaching the good word of his new title. Only one can reign, because you obviously can't play two games at the same time. It's not humanly possible. So who will it be? I'll start with my own history in this field so that my biases are known and my perspective is understood before I make claims about the quality of either side. I started playing World of Warcraft in around 2006 when I was 10 years old. I didn't have the mental capacity to understand what was happening in the game or what I was doing in it at all, but those lightsabers were basically photorealistic and probably the coolest thing I'd ever seen on a computer at that point. Alright, the models aged like milk, but most of my time playing computers at this point had been spent on Age of Empires 2, and this was a massive improvement. Even though I didn't understand it, I loved the game. I played Night Elves because they got the cool tiger mounts at level 40, and that's better than a stupid fucking horse, obviously. But there's something even better than tigers. We have real life tigers, and they don't even let you ride them around, so what's the fucking point? The Horde, see, good guys of the story, the faction that real men and hot women play, had fucking dinosaurs. And the Horde is where I stayed. I raided up until Nighthold, which is when I went off to college, but I never took the game as seriously as some of the balder, sweatier people of the community.
What?
I played the game semi-casually for the majority of my life, and I have a lot of love for it. I got serious about the game right at the end of Battle for Azeroth and attempted to revive my old guild, failing miserably, and dove into Shadowlands during the lockdowns. I had a lot of fun racing to 60 with my brother, watching streams as we went, and teaching myself how to optimize all the fun out of the game as often as possible. Because as we all know,
that is the holy grail of being able to enjoy the game. I'm able to play the game and enjoy it so much that I no longer have to play it.
The Shadowlands expansion is fine. I don't know. It's basically a new map pack for the price of a full game. No new races, class abilities, character customizations, classes, factions, or any new gameplay features at all, really. Makes it a real kick in the balls for $50. I wish Torghast felt more rewarding to do. It's one of the few pieces of content I genuinely enjoyed. The new zones were neat, world quests are lame and they have been since Legion. The factions all fall into three categories: disgusting and irrelevant, tolerable but unappealing, and I guess they're fine. The Covenant Renown system is awful. The Conduit system is worse. The rewards and cosmetics farming is a joke. The story is horrible. The world building is pretty bad too. The characters Blizzard are focusing on are beyond unappealing, both in design and personality. The ones who they don't focus on get humiliated or emasculated or both in favor of their favorite Banshee attention whore. I like the new raid a lot, but I don't have the group or the gear to try the harder difficulties, so I can't attest to its quality at the highest end, except through watching others do the content. It looks alright, but difficulty tiers are stupid and lazy. Just make a new raid that's harder with better gear, and preferably not reskinned old gear. And preferably not gear that makes the old raid obsolete. Again, for the 100th time. Mythic Plus is another stupid, lazy system Blizzard created so they don't have to make things actually challenging anymore. They can just pump health and damage and call it a new difficulty. It's shallow and it's unfulfilling, which is why no one does it. The newest patch looks really fucking bad. All the actual problems with the game are being built on like a cancerous tumor, and the developers are so out of touch with the people that actually play the game, I'm convinced they don't play it themselves. Basically, everyone is waiting for this patch so they can do the new raid and the new dungeons once and get their mounts and achievements, then go back to waiting for the next patch that might finally fix all the broken parts of the game. Maybe give them some content that's actually worth doing for a change. I am not particularly optimistic about that. The problem is that the base gameplay of World of Warcraft is incredibly fucking fun. In every aspect that it could be fun. It's competitive, balanced.
Okay. Trinketing. What happened to my health? Wait,
the
what?
combat is tight and well executed. Doing top DPS or heals is pure dopamine. One-shotting idiots in arena with a big-ass crit chain is... World of Warcraft is probably the most fun... This word is incredibly subjective. It's not a quality assessment. Please don't put a lot of weight behind it. Core game I have ever played. Unfortunately, it is the least interesting and least rewarding game of all time because the content you have to use that mechanical core in, it sucks playing the shit! I didn't really get to play Classic because of my schedule at school, and my underlevel characters and lack of investment in the game made Burning Crusade wholly unappealing. Even before any of the garbage store bullshit Blizzard felt the need to shove up our asses.
Yep, you're just sitting there, you want to eat your tasty salad, there's a big dick in it, and you're like, man, I don't want that dick in my salad.
So take this with a grain of salt, because it really only applies to up to level 30 or so, but those classic versions of the game are so much more rewarding, with so much less actual content, because the game makes you feel like every step you take is an accomplishment. Every enemy killed, every bit of gear collected, every quest completed, every level gained. I got the Robes of Arugul on my Classic Mage just before the BC pre-patch, and I literally jumped out of my chair after winning the role. I have no idea what my legendary shoulders are called in retail. My point is that the new expansion is fine, despite the best efforts of the people designing it, because the game itself is just fun. So, a couple things happened in quick succession that grabbed my attention. Bellular did this video about an interview Preach did with Ian, the game runner for World of Warcraft, shredding Ian for his massively out-of-touch takes and excuses for why things that make no sense, Conduit Energy, Torghast, Mythic Plus, have to be certain ways. I watched Asmongold mauled about the same thing and the broken design philosophy at Blizzard. Around this time I heard people recommend Final Fantasy XIV, but it wasn't really appealing to me. Then a legend died. Rest in peace, Mira. And all over the internet I saw this. This is a tribute by Dark Knights, a class in Final Fantasy designed around the character Guts from Mira's signature work. And it was just a really beautiful thing to see. With all the praise and support this game had been receiving, not only from its own community, but from the Warcraft community that I love so much, and in the midst of all the damage Blizzard is doing to their own IP out of what I can only assume is hubris, these tributes were the push that I needed to give this game a chance. I can say now that after about 100 hours of game time, I have been pleasantly surprised. Keep in mind that I have about 100 hours more content to play through before I really start reaching the end game, and that's not even to go over the classes that I haven't tried and all the professions I haven't worked on. So this is really a first impressions video from a World of Warcraft veteran to a new environment. So how does Final Fantasy measure up? Let's start with mechanics, which I've already told you that World of Warcraft handles phenomenally. For the most part, I will assume that you have some familiarity with World of Warcraft and how it works as a game, but I will do my best to make this as approachable as possible for people that are new to both games. Final Fantasy has a 2.5 second global cooldown, which is a full second longer than World of Warcraft.
Oh, the fucking cooldown. Oh, the GCD, the GCD, the GCD. I'm sorry, but I just don't give a shit about that.
I'm starting here because it seems to be where everyone starts. Probably because of the familiarity and similarity to the WoW system. You might think that this makes the game feel a lot slower, but it really doesn't. I think early leveling in World of Warcraft Classic and Final Fantasy XIV are comparable in their speed and feel, and considering how good the Classic leveling experience is, that's high praise. The combat and animations of your characters when you're controlling them are incredibly tight and smooth. In Final Fantasy, there are plenty of abilities you get and learn to weave throughout the combat that are not affected by the GCD, including direct damage abilities, buffs, resistances, death prevention, and damage reduction. The combat is kind of incredible, and the abilities feel like they have real weight and impact behind them. Combo abilities are a really cool feature, and landing a crit at the right time can be really awesome. I think this is something that even World of Warcraft would benefit from by implementing. Loss of control in this game feels really bad, but it does in every other game as well. I'm not sure if there's a simple solution to that problem, but it is still worth mentioning that the game does have it, and it's not fun. While tanking in dungeons, the response from enemies can sometimes be just a little bit slow, which can be a little bit frustrating, but it's a pretty quick adjustment. Hitboxes in Final Fantasy are something that can be a little bit confusing. Generally speaking, the combat animation happens when the visible hitbox ends, and if you're in the hitbox when the animation starts, you take the damage. This sounds nice in theory, however, visually, because the animations can be a little bit slow, it can look really strange, where you think you're obviously not in an enemy ability, but you get hit anyways. It can take a little bit of adjusting to, especially for people that are used to playing things like Dark Souls, where timing animations to maximize damage is the core gameplay mechanic. Threat, called Enmity in Final Fantasy, is generated by tanks through a toggleable stance, which is nice, except that when entering a dungeon, it is automatically disabled, like 80% of the time. And forgetting to re-enable it can be disastrous. Higher level combat and leveling has been incredibly fun, especially the raid content like the Crystal Tower, though after 100 hours, I'm still only level 57 out of 80 on the Dark Knight. Healing seems to be a bit more complicated than World of Warcraft though. I haven't done much of it, so I don't have a lot of experience, but from what I've gathered from my group, some healers breeze through massive pulls, and some healers can only handle like one pack at a time. The competency of my group's DPS has varied wildly. Some groups feel incredible slicing through enemies like they're nothing and beating bosses in under 30 seconds, and some have been horrifically slow and awful, completely unable to kill even 2 mobs of enemies at once. I have spent like 30 seconds trying the crafting system, which is treated as its own class or job in the game, but my experience with it is too limited to give a full review of the merits of it. Looking at the very basics and searching through some of the recipes that you find scattered throughout the world, it seems like it has some neat features. While leveling, the game's dungeons and raids operate off of a group finder system, which has exactly the same problems as the one in World of Warcraft. Namely, it reduces social interactions and makes it so it's much more difficult to get actually invested in the social world of the game. It's not terrible, and it makes dungeon finding a little bit easier, but I just don't know if the costs outweigh the benefits. So far, the content that I've experienced is much simpler mechanically than retail World of Warcraft, with very straightforward bosses and enemies. But I also haven't experienced any of this game's actually difficult content, so keep that in mind moving forward. The content I have experienced I would put on the same level as retail leveling. You can mostly ignore everything except a couple insta-kill mechanics. These fucking bees. Fuck you, Doom. Just fuck Karn in general, and be totally fine. The game benefits a lot from taking your time and trying things out. I wouldn't recommend staying as your first class and racing to the end unless you're really invested in it. Try some stuff out. You might find that you really like some of the more unique playstyles. As far as World of Warcraft's mechanics are concerned, it's good. There are very few mechanical issues, the game is tight and responsive, and it's really a blast to play through. Let's move on to progression. So in World of Warcraft, you pick a class and that's your class until the end of the game, or you quit. Some classes have more than one way to play, but you can't change the class of your character without re-rolling. In Final Fantasy, your character can take on any job. It's a class. I'm going to call it both a class and a job in this review. That you want at any time by completing an intro quest and equipping the class weapon. But you do have to level that job up, regardless of any other progress you've made in order to progress the story, which is level locked. Part of what makes the World of Warcraft so engaging is class identity, and the sense that your class is yours. As the name of this channel suggests, I'm a mage. Reckful was a rogue. McConnell is a paladin.
No! He fucking learned it! No! You fucking idiot! You fucking stupid idiot! Fuck! God damn it, motherfucker! Are you shitting me, dude? You gotta gotta be fucking kidding me! What?
Asmongold is an undead necromancer. I thought that having the ability to change this at any time would diminish that feeling of ownership, and I was worried about it going into the game. But to my surprise, I picked my class and I feel exactly the same about it in Final Fantasy as I do in World of Warcraft. It's mine. It's my main, even if I can change it whenever I want. My biggest complaint about progression is that in Final Fantasy, some classes are situationally locked behind story and level. I came into the game wanting to play a Dark Knight and unwilling to spend money on boosts or the online store. Unfortunately, in order to play the class I wanted to play, I needed to complete the entire storyline of A Realm Reborn, the first full story in the game, and the content most Final Fantasy players will tell you is the worst that the game has to offer, which I finished in roughly 60 hours. Once I unlocked Ishgard, I discovered the unfortunate truth that I needed to grind another 20 levels because I was reset to level 30 upon picking up my new job. That is easily the worst and most frustrating part of the game. If you load up Final Fantasy and you have a class that you know you want to start on, I'd recommend looking at what part of the story that class becomes available and possibly boosting to it, then replaying the main scenario all the way through. Unless the class is available at launch, the content you'd miss by boosting isn't really worth the frustration of feeling like you're wasting 60 plus hours building up a job or a class that you aren't going to do in the future. That said, the content is definitely worth doing, so you should go back and experience it once you have your class unlocked. The rest of the progression in the game is handled surprisingly well, with the main questline, side quests, and class quests lining up neatly with each other to create an experience that teaches you how to play your class and utilize new abilities effectively, instead of just dumping a spellbook on you and hoping you figure it out as you go. The dungeon and raid content is introduced through the story, which is probably why they tied it to the group finder in the first place, so that it was easily accessible, but it's a nice way of introducing new players to it. As far as gear is concerned, there's an auto-equip recommended gear function, which is helpful when you start to get overloaded with loot as you progress. You will get a lot of loot, so you can play multiple classes effectively, which is cool. It's kind of like Borderlands, but not as over the top. Once you finish the main storyline questing, most leveling is done through reputation dailies and dungeon grinding. From my experience, it's fast, the gains you make are valuable, and useful even for later levels, and the game respects the time you put into it with the late game rewards so long as you've unlocked them on at least one class. Leveling is a massive part of this game, and depending on how many jobs you take up, you'll be doing it a lot. So it's a good thing that developers have taken care to make the experience not only simple and approachable, but an actually fun process. Content scales you to its level, so you can participate in it wherever you are in the world, and dungeons and raids do the same thing, which makes experience gains a little bit better as you're doing lower level content in stuff like the daily roulette. World of Warcraft Classic had some of the best leveling of all time in any game ever. It's still probably the king of MMOs in that respect, but compared to the shit show that is retail leveling, Final Fantasy is a mastercraft. I want to talk aesthetics now. This will be a shorter section, but it's one of the most important. The way your character looks is always something that will matter to the overwhelming majority of players. It's not always true. For instance, Sekiro, a game I love dearly, that I think is one of the best games of all times, and is easily in the top 3 of the FromSoft library, has almost no visual customization options for its main character, because it just doesn't need it. In general though, for a role-playing game, the way a player looks matters. World of Warcraft excels at visual aesthetics. Some of the most iconic looks and designs anywhere come from Blizzard, even in the Warcraft environment where the models aren't photorealistic or next-gen graphics, they still look amazing. Sometimes their gear and mounts can miss the mark, but so many times when they aren't being lazy cunts, the ability to make yourself look badass has been a staple of World of Warcraft. From what I've seen so far, Final Fantasy has done a great job of giving players some really awesome aesthetics. Most of the gear I've seen has been plate armor, but it all looks really fantastic. I'm not a huge fan of the online store. I think it cheapens the stuff that isn't on the store and isn't right to the people that earned that stuff. That said, the stuff available, even without ever touching the store, can be incredible. The environments in both games can be stunning, and the worlds of both are gorgeous. Exploration in both of these games can be just as fun as the core combat gameplay is. One issue I have with Final Fantasy is that it does try to be a much more realistic look with its visual style. Obviously, it's not going for picture perfect, but you understand what I mean. And from a decent distance, it looks really good. But the close-up on these cutscenes of characters really demonstrate how low resolution the assets in the game are. The mapping on them isn't great, and they all look kind of flat and blocky. Any real inspection of the world will kind of break down the illusion of refinement they've created. It can be a little distracting, especially considering how pronounced it can get. Keep in mind, this is from the first 2 expansions of the game. I don't know if it gets better in the later content. Final Fantasy also has a reputation as a weeb game, which is completely fair and valid. It is a Japanese RPG. The little kid race is weird, for Western audiences especially. The catgirls are a concept that is either a massive turn off or turn on, depending on the person, and it can alienate a big chunk of players. Not everything is for everyone, and I totally get that. If the look of this game doesn't appeal to you, then it just doesn't appeal to you, and it's going to be really hard to get immersed and invested. But I think it's undeniable that Final Fantasy pulls off its style with a lot of grace, and the developers definitely know how to make something cool when they want to. Moving forward, I'm going to talk content, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to be incredibly broad concerning Final Fantasy. The content is worth experiencing, and you should go into it with as few spoilers as possible, so I'm not going to give you any here. Let's be honest for a moment. The story in World of Warcraft is nonsensical garbage, especially recently. The way it's presented to you is a yellow mark over an NPC and a wall of text. There's maybe like 10 people out of the 100 million plus that played this game that have any idea what's going on in these quests or what they actually say. You click the man, you click accept, you kill the boars, he gives you money and gear. Why? What's happening in the world around you? I think there's a war? Where? In an instance that doesn't exist in the actual world. What happens in the world when we kill the literal incarnation of fire? Nothing. What about when we kill the dragon aspect of the earth? Thrall retires or something? When a literal old god is released into the world? Well, there's some tentacles in these 2 zones, I guess. Nothing has any impact, and the world always ends up at exactly the same place. Another horde leader dead, and 2 factions hating each other for stupid-ass reasons. It feels like there's no coherent story that World of Warcraft wants to tell you. It just wants to have flashy visuals and these things happen. On the flip side, Final Fantasy seems to have a story to tell, and it makes a real effort to engage you with it. I'm not a fan of games, especially MMOs, having chosen one plots. It feels really strange being the ultimate warrior in a world filled with other ultimate warriors. Final Fantasy does a better job with this concept than most, but it's still a little silly. However, what impresses me about Final Fantasy is their attention to detail with their world. People are making decisions around you as the story is progressing, and the world reacts to the events that you participate in. There's struggles for power, destruction, widespread chaos alongside the main storyline. And there are consequences for the actions in the story. The story is relatively linear, and the player doesn't really have the ability to make meaningful choices, at least not impactful ones, but they execute their ideas with a care and attention that other larger and more financially dominant studios seem completely incapable of. It's both impressive and infuriating. Side quests tie into the world and give it depth as well. It's almost like the developers care about their world, weirdly enough. Dungeons in Final Fantasy are relatively simple and straightforward, with big tie-ins to the main story going on. They're usually just straight shots with 1 or 2 puzzles in them and 3 or 4 bosses, and they can usually be finished in about 15 minutes or less. Plus you scale down to their level so that the content actually feels like it's still challenging. As you get closer to the end of A Realm Reborn, there are some main scenario dungeons that have 20 minutes or more of story cutscenes, which for some unknowable reason are completely unskippable. The first time through is cool, if not a little long-winded and overblown. The next time, when you're trying to run those dungeons for rewards, is not as pleasant. And subsequent runs are grating. World of Warcraft avoided this concern entirely by just not having cutscenes in their dungeons, which is boring, and their dungeons have less than no impact on what little plot they bothered to cobble together this year, but at least you could get in and out. I haven't participated in hardly any player versus player. As far as I can tell, it's not a very big community. I would have to do more of it and experience more of it personally, but from what I can tell, if you're looking for a game that is heavily player versus player focused, this is probably not the game for you. To the developers at Square Enix, an overriding PvP-only action bar is a bad idea. Remove it, please. Raids are awesome. They aren't the same kind of weekly trial that World of Warcraft raids are, as far as I can tell with the limited experience I have with them, but they are really cool. At least the Realm Reborn ones are. I won't say anything else. Just play the game, get to level 50 on your favorite class, try a raid. It's worth it. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the communities of both games. World of Warcraft is filled with toxic, balding, sweaty, angry, disgruntled, try-hard boomer fucks. They'll kick you from a group because you have the wrong trinket or talent.
Pulled, I'm going to kick them.
They'll call you bad as they spit on your corpse in arena skirmishes.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Who seem to genuinely hate, and I mean passionately, vocally despise the game they are currently investing 40 plus hours a week in. I love them. I wouldn't change the World of Warcraft community for all the gold in Azeroth. If you don't like how elitist the people that play this game are, get better at the game, or play with people that don't care about being good. I'm very new to Final Fantasy. Most of my interactions with players have been through dicking around in party chat, in raids and dungeons. And most people are genuinely nice, offering aid on how to play more complex classes, or just helping to kill time while we wait for the fucking ornamental over here to finish his 20-minute speech. This game is obviously more casual than World of Warcraft. Everything that I've experienced up to that point screams that. Even this early into the content. It caters to a much more casual audience, and the people that play it are reflective of that. Relaxed, laid back, there to play and have fun with the game. Not to maximize parse numbers on their 350th attempt at Mythic Denathrius, who's basically just regular Denathrius, but instead he one-shots you if you're 20 pixels out of place. I like the community of this game a lot, though I wish the crazies would stop being so pushy towards content creators. I understand your excitement, but you're creating a barrier for entry to people that will think you are a lunatic and won't want to associate with or appease you. Overall, the community in Final Fantasy has been mostly great, and the amount of people that you meet throughout the world is really wonderful, even if they are dickheads who steal your tags. Alright, so let's wrap this whole thing up and declare the king of MMOs by right of conquest. And I am happy to announce that neither game is objectively better than the other. I know, you're all shocked and appalled. All these comparisons for a bullshit fence-sitting answer that doesn't declare one of these games objectively bad and dead? The truth is that the reason I come to this conclusion is that these aren't the same type of game. They almost feel like two entirely different genres. They have similarities, especially in their core gameplays, but that's it. It's just a similar mechanic or function. The end result is a completely unique experience for each game. Final Fantasy is a game you can play all on your own. You can get immersed in a story and a world, explore and progress, and play at your own pace, and still do almost all the content in the game. World of Warcraft, by nature of its design, requires you to play with other people, to rely on them to prove your own worth to them. It's a team-based game with team-based content in it. That isn't to say Final Fantasy doesn't benefit from playing with friends, or that it doesn't have team-based content in it, but it isn't what the game is built around in the same way World of Warcraft is. Both have their merits, and both have their flaws. Both struggles in places the other succeeds, and both could learn a lot from the other, but they are fundamentally different at their core. That said, I would happily recommend Final Fantasy XIV for most people who have ever played just about any other video game before. It's simple, it's beautiful, it has a little something for just about every kind of person there is in the world, and it teaches you how to play it incredibly effectively. The people developing it seem to love their audience and their world, which is weird for a World of Warcraft player to see, and they have put some serious effort into making the game rewarding, respectful of your time, and most importantly, they've made it fun. I would not recommend World of Warcraft to almost anyone. It's a game that deliberately disrespects your time and aims to waste as much of it as it possibly can so they can market engagement metrics to their shareholders. The philosophy of the design team seems to directly contradict the needs and desires of their player base. The aesthetics and story are getting lazier and lazier with every patch and every expansion. They focus on arbitrary systems no one gives half a shit about, that take time away from developing the things players actually want in the game. Tier sets, raids, worthwhile content, progression, class strengths and identity, meaningful rewards for time invested, etc. It makes no sense and is preventing World of Warcraft from being anything more than mediocre with great gameplay. And I can only see it getting worse from here because the people making it don't care if it's fun or not. They care if you log in every week and do an arbitrary number of tasks in their empty, vapid, shallow world. It isn't a bad game because it is still fun to play, but the content is getting progressively worse, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. If you want to pick up something new, check out Final Fantasy. It's a great time to get invested in it, with a new expansion on the horizon and hundreds of hours of content to play through. It can be a little weird and goofy at times, but overall I think Square Enix have made something they should be proud of here, and it's worth your time to give it a shot.